All right, let's get this started. I think it's just the three of us today, but that'll be good.
Let's
We'll
do
be
it.
able to have a focused discussion. Hello and welcome to another Watercooler Wednesday. Today we're going to be discussing the role of the modern CFO. So the modern crypto CFO. What does that mean? What additional roles and responsibilities get put on the crypto CFO that haven't existed ever previously, right? Like in TradFi, we have banks that handle the security of our funds and help us manage those funds. Um, Traditionally in markets, you would either pay a market maker to help you if you had low liquidity, or you would just, if you're a publicly traded company, your stock would just be traded on the stock market, right? So with the advent of being able to mint your own tokens and not just mint your own tokens on one chain, you can mint those tokens on a number of different chains with bridging and with different layer twos. It becomes a huge rat's nest to try to manage all of this stuff, and a lot of managing of things that never was required of you previously. So we want to discuss today kind of some of what are some of those additional challenges that get put on the modern CFO. What are some of the solutions or best practices for dealing with those? And what does compliance look like in this new realm of business when you can operate very easily in pretty much every jurisdiction in the world? You have a lot of DAOs that are operating that may not even have a jurisdiction selected. So let's kind of kick it. I'll kick it off by just kind of talking through some of the major kind of points. But if at any point anyone wants to jump in and add something or question something, feel free. Um, so just kind of starting off with the safeguarding of digital assets, I think this is the biggest difference between TradFi and DeFi, where you become your own bank, right? And so previously in TradFi, you would give your funds to a bank, and your bank would keep those secure. And this could be funds that you're holding for clients. It could be unearned revenue. It could be a number of different things that may not actually be your money, but you may be holding it on behalf of a customer. A really good example of this is a sales tax, right? You have a fiduciary duty to hold on to that sales tax and then remit it to the governing bodies. And so it becomes even more important to have really secure processes behind holding these assets, because a lot of times you're holding them on the behalf of other people. So what does that mean? So we've talked a little bit about security before on these calls. Ultimately, there's going to be different security levels for different use cases, right? Similarly to walking down the street with your wallet in your pocket, that's very convenient. It's also not very secure. So as a result, you manage the risk by only holding a small amount of your total wealth or portfolio in your wallet so that you can transact with it, but also not be worried that if it gets stolen or lost, that you're going to collapse the business, right? The same goes with things in crypto as well. So if you have wallet or funds on an exchange, we talk about not your keys, not your coins. When you're having funds on an exchange, you don't hold those funds, so you don't really have possession of those funds. So it may be convenient if your company is in the business of actively trading those assets, or you're trying to off-ramp those. In the case of Coinbase, where maybe you have USDC and you want to convert that to US dollars and then transfer it to your bank account. That obviously you're going to want to interact with an exchange wallet, because now you're going through the process of getting access to those funds in fiat dollars, right? Where you may need to interact with more traditional sources. So in those cases, you want to make sure that you have some funds, to be able to do those aspects, but you want to manage that risk by making it not a huge amount of your portfolio, and you don't want to leave those funds on there longer than they need to be on there. Next step up, we got hot wallets, which we've talked about as well before, but just a quick refresher. It's a non-custodial wallet where you have the keys to those coins, but it's hot in that it's connected to the internet. And Lourdes can probably speak to this as well, but like anything that's connected to the internet has an inherent risk, because if someone has access to your device, or maybe they have a keylogger on your system and they can remotely hack your device, they could commandeer your wallet and they could send those funds elsewhere. So definitely more secure than a centralized exchange wallet. However, there's still a level of risk there, because it's hot, it's connected to the internet. And then finally, we have cold storage, which you want to do your treasuries treasuries in a larger company, you're probably going to want to do multi-sig, where you need multiple signatures, very similar to, having requirements for double signing of checks over a certain amount. Basically the same thing, right? So overall, we want to be securing our assets, and we're going to have, most likely most businesses are going to do most of their transactions in cold storage, because there's not that much of a barrier between using hot wallet and a cold wallet. Really the only added thing that you need to do when you send a transaction using a Trezor or a Ledger hardware wallet is just accept that on the device itself. And so really most businesses, most people operating in this space as a CFO, they want to be able to send funds in a secure and convenient way. And the best balance of that is a hardware wallet. So again, if you're going to be moving hundreds of thousands of dollars, or like have significant purchases, or moving things around from your treasury wallet to those other separate wallets, those want to be secured by multi-sig, so that you have multiple officers. Maybe it's a 3 out of 5 consensus or a 2 out of 3. Generally, we want to protect ourselves, so we want to have more options than less, so that in case something happens to someone, we don't lose access to that wallet. But making sure that these processes are secure, taking TradFi as a template, and then augmenting that to the needs of DeFi, right? Any questions on like the securing of assets, or any comments on like maybe the challenges of that or anything like that? Welcome, Lourdes, by the way. Thanks for joining. So yeah, so again, going hand in hand with safeguarding of assets, which is a new challenge for the modern CFO, we have internal controls, right? This has always been a role of the CFO and the accounting department, and maybe the internal audit team. But this need here gets compounded because sometimes you may be a DAO where you're responsible for the managing of whether it's smart contract risk, or maybe you're a decentralized exchange like Uniswap, and maybe you have protocols that have hundreds of billions of dollars in total value locked. So you want to make sure that those that have access to maybe manipulating the code and changing the code to add to it, you want to make sure that that decision-making power isn't centralized, and that it can't be manipulated by a malicious third party, right? So having really robust internal controls for these different, for every different aspect of your business, specifically focused on the finances and the asset management, is going to be really key. A really big challenge for the modern CFO is, who holds access to those private keys? Because ultimately, if we're talking about having multi-sig, we're having, hardware wallets, but then the CFO has the private keys to everyone's, multi-sig access, now you've centralized a risk here in the CFO maybe being able to run off with the company funds. And as we know, things on chain are immutable. So if that person is able to get the funds out of the business and then maybe run it through a mixer or some other way to obscure their trail on chain, that person could make off with that money, and there could be no way for someone to recover it. So who's managing the keys? Is one person managing the keys? Are multiple people managing the keys? Are we using, for example, you could use, often you have seed phrases that are 24 words, but you can add a 25th word, and maybe the CFO controls the 24-word seed phrase, but you need that 25th word from the CEO or from someone else in order to unlock it. So they just have it in their mind. They don't have to have it written down because it's one word. So maybe you have that added level of security. I'm curious as to what people think about from a standpoint of like, who keeps the keys? How do we handle that? Who's going to handle those keys? And maybe do some people have access to certain keys and not all of them, or what do you think that looks like?
Yeah, I think Lourdes put in the chat.
Yeah, Lourdes said something in the chat. What about chief compliance officers to share the responsibility of managing the keys? Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe, do you want to maybe elaborate on that, Lourdes?
Hi, sorry about that. I'm working from my phone. I'm like 10 years old working on this phone. No, absolutely. Chief compliance officers should have responsibilities of managing keys along with the CFOs, along with the chief operating officers and legal.
Okay, cool.
So
So maybe
those are my thoughts. Yes.
okay. Yeah, and so what do we think about, so anytime we talk about maybe duplicating keys, and having like multiple people controlling the keys, are we thinking maybe that, or are we thinking, hey, maybe this person controls the keys for this wallet and this person controls the keys for that wallet? I think that, like, let's say we're doing a 5 out of, we have 5 people on the multi-sig for the entire company treasury, and we need 3 of their votes. I think in that circumstance, we would want chief compliance officer, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, CEO, and then maybe the controller, or or someone else. Maybe not.
What about cybersecurity officers?
Yeah, sure. Cyber or CTO, right? And so we've got 5 people now for the multi-sig. They each keep their own private keys, right? They each keep their own private keys to their signer as a wallet, as a wallet signer. And so that, I think, is the problem solved here. I think the challenge comes to when we have like the hardware wallet, that's maybe the kind of the intermediary security, where we have maybe payroll expenses are coming out of that. So it's still larger amounts, but we want it secured. Maybe in that instance, we have chief compliance officer and chief financial officer. Maybe in that case, we might duplicate the keys, or have triplicates. Maybe not more than that, but just so that if one person gets let go, for example, let's say we fire the CFO, they can't immediately just drain that wallet. Well, they could drain that wallet, but what we could do is we could transfer those funds, recover that wallet before we notify that person that we're letting them go, move those funds, and then set up a security, protocol or internal controls around that moving forward. So I think that with the multi-sig, the answer is pretty clear, right? We would just have each person that's responsible holding their own keys. And then with regards to hardware wallet, you might decide as a company that you just want the CFO to handle that. But the only problem with that is if that person needs to get let go, you need to trust them to then hand those over, right? And it doesn't really work if you're just like, oh, hey, I'm the CFO, I hold the private keys for here, here's where I'm storing them, because now anyone who knows that information could then, commandeer those funds. So
could I add something, Taylor?
Yes,
really
please.
quick.
Yeah.
I'm at the client site right now. We have our hard wallets and safes. We have passwords, security, and then we have to sign it out, sign it in.
Okay.
That's our process with hard wallets, and anything has to do with keys.
Okay. And what about the like the seed phrases that secure those hardware wallets? Where are those kept?
We have passwords to access that information.
Oh, and but like, is it a password where the seed phrase is then stored on a computer?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a long, painful process for us to gain
Okay.
access to those type of keys.
Okay. Yeah. So the only critique I would have with that is that the device itself doesn't actually store the like the device itself doesn't actually store the crypto. So really what needs to be secured is the 24-word seed phrase, because that is what, like, if I just bought a Trezor, for example, and I had the 24-word seed phrase, I don't need that hardware wallet at all. The original one, I can just recover it on the new one. And so for me, it's the biggest consideration is the private key itself and the 24-word seed phrase, because that stuff is what is needed to actually access the funds. Of course, you need the device, but you can recover it on a brand new device and set it back up as long as you have those other items. So just something to keep in mind, just to make sure that we anyways.
No, it's good to know. Thank you. I'll bring it to my security officers. Attention.
That's great.
I do like that idea. I do like the idea of putting it in a safe though for the short term, because you can absolutely transact with the wallet. I guess you could clear out all the funds as well, but I think maybe both ways, security on both ways. And it's interesting to think about, traditional security with these elements, because even though it's a different beast and a different animal with, passphrases and things like that. It's still, where do we secure these? Taylor will probably laugh. Last week, I lost the seed phrase to my ledger. And the good thing was I knew it was in my office somewhere. So I tore apart this room. It took me 2 days to find it. And it was inside of a book. So the moral of the story is hide it very well, but then remember where you hide it. So that was the big thing for me. So having a process, knowing that it would be in the safe or in that scenario would be good, because normally I keep the ledger in the safe, but then I hide the pass key. So I didn't want to have them like together, because then that creates more issues in itself. So it's interesting, and I'm interested to see how more traditional security measures will develop as this becomes more norm, for larger businesses, because it is tricky. It's definitely tricky.
So one thing I've heard people doing, more on the personal level with like ultra high net worth individuals, is to split up, like say it's a 24-word seed phrase, we could split it up into 8 words. And if you're wealthy enough, you could spread that between like 3 different safe deposit boxes across the US or across different countries in the globe, so that you would need access to each and every one of those in order to recover those funds. So, in the event of your passing or something like that, and you're leaving your estate and these different safe deposit boxes, you could recover those in that way, where if someone just gets access to one of them, they're not going to be able to do anything with that. If they're getting access to just 2 of them, they're not going to be able to do anything with that. And I think you could do something similar with, if it's a massive company and they're managing hundreds of millions or hundreds of billions of dollars, it may make sense for those officers that have access to multi-sig, maybe duplicating those in safe deposit boxes in different places, so that you could still access that in the event that someone passed, but it's a lengthier process. Like Lourdes is describing, you're making that process difficult, so that there's red tape to go through, so that someone can't do it on a whim. They can't say, oh, I'm having a bad day, screw this company, I'm just going to drain them of their funds and I'm going to run off. There's multiple steps, there's sign outs, there's evidence that you took this out, or things like that. So it's interesting, because you don't have this level of thought and like need to come up with creative. I don't like using the term creative in conjunction with accounting, but when you're talking about internal controls in crypto, you have to get creative, because it's a different challenge, and there are new challenges that haven't been seen before. So yeah, creative finance, not creative accounting. Creative internal controls, not creative accounting. Although you do kind of have to get creative in crypto sometimes when you have new and novel use cases. I won't get into reflection tokens, but that's a challenging one that I had to deal with recently. But
Is it possible? I'm not familiar. Is it possible? So you think of like a company credit card where you can set spending limits. Is that a thing with hardware wallets as well? Because I'm just thinking about that. It's like if an employee, I mean, maybe there's a different way they go about it, and maybe still sticking with TradFi. But if I'm an employee at a company, maybe I'm the head of marketing, and I need to spend money, and most of our finances are in crypto, or I prefer to use crypto. Is there like spending caps and things like that? I haven't seen any of that.
Well, the thing is that if you have the private keys to a wallet, you can do what you want with that wallet. So I'm not saying that it can't exist. I'm just unaware of how it would work. The beauty of smart contracts and of programmable money is that you could probably accomplish what you're describing. But if you own the wallet, like if you own the access to that wallet, you can move funds as you so choose, and you decide what the spending limit is. Currently on Uniswap, for example, if you want to make a trade, you first have to approve the transaction and the assets being traded, and you have to set a spending limit. So in that event, like, you are setting a spending limit for that protocol to be able to access a certain number of that asset that you're exchanging. So in that sense, you can do that, but that's only when you're interacting with a smart contract. With regards to delegating, I think the way that you would handle that in a corporate environment is you would say, okay, you can make payments on behalf of the company. We're going to set you up a new wallet to do that. And we're going to transfer you funds from the treasury or from the hardware wallets only in the amount that you're going to need for, a 30-day period or something like that. So that you're managing the risk. But it's a really good thought, Brandon. I think that ultimately you probably could do something like that. And there's a new ETH proposal that's basically allowing for effectively you can assign folks that can recover your seed phrase on your behalf. I think it's called account abstraction, where there's a new type of wallet on the Ethereum network. So, as a result, on any layer twos or any other EVM compatible blockchains, where you could generate a wallet that is recoverable. And so some people, like the true, like the degens and some of the OGs, may not think that this is an attractive way, because there's way that people could game it, and maybe they could, you know, um, if exploit your relatives, if maybe your relatives are in financial trouble, and maybe they betray you in a way. I'm not saying, I'm not hoping for the worst, but we have to think about the ways that this could be exploited. But account abstraction is a way that you can recover wallets and things like that. So I'm sure that there's a way that maybe you could delegate access to the wallet, but only to a certain limit. But I think that that's something that's going to come as the industry continues to evolve. And I don't know of an existing tool that allows that.
I think one thing too, I don't want to get too far off topic, but one thing too maybe would be if a smart contract. So if I'm the marketing guy, I get $10,000 to spend per quarter. If there was a smart contract that would keep my wallet at 10,000, you know what I mean? Like, so if I spent 3,000, it would kind of like refill it maybe from the treasury. So then as a corporation, we're only risking that. Well, maybe it's a 30-day period, like you're saying, or, just a nominal amount of money. And again, I think that ties back into another role that the CFO would need to, monitor and be in charge of, and audit those contracts and things of that nature.
So one thing you can do with that is, I'm very familiar with this type of stuff. So when you can create all types of smart contracts for escrow type transactions. So you could have like a drip function, like you're talking about, where the only challenge with that is that the company would have to, let's say you get a budget of, $10,000 per month for the year. You could have a vesting schedule that the company executes a smart contract at the beginning of the year to say, hey, you're going to get $10,000 per month. It's going to get sent to your wallet or unlocked. It wouldn't really get sent to your wallet. It would just get unlocked from a platform that you can then access to spend as much as you want. And so up to whatever we give you. So in that event, you can do like token locks, and token locks can work for any ERC20 token. So you could lock up, wrapped ether. You could lock up USDC, which would probably be the case in a business. That's a really good use case there, where you could say, hey, we're going to give you $10,000. We're going to give you $120,000 budget for the year, but we want you to spend it on a monthly basis. You're going to get a vesting schedule, basically.
Like it.
Yeah. So we were talking earlier about safeguarding company assets and like the fiduciary duty that many companies find themselves in with regards to sales taxes or things like that. And one kind of risk that the CFO, the modern CFO, modern crypto CFO has, is that they have to manage a lot more currency translation risks effectively, because a really good example of this is, let's say you're selling NFTs, like your Pudgy Penguins or something like that, and your business is selling NFTs. You may, in a lot of cases, have sales tax obligations, but you may be selling those assets in ETH, for example. And so if you sell that asset for $10,000 in ETH, and then ETH immediately drops in price by 20%, and now you only have 8,000 worth of ETH, you still owe that same amount of sales tax that you previously owed. However, you now have less profit. And so there's a lot of need for the CFO to be agile or be strategic in how they're accepting funds, so that they can either through smart contracts automatically set aside the amount they're going to need for sales taxes, or decide to convert X amount. You need policies and procedures in place to standardize how you're going to handle when you don't have like fiat pegged assets coming in, or even stable coins can depeg as well. So you need a way to manage additional risk, because in this industry you're introducing so much additional risk from many different factors. We already talked about security and that stuff, but like currency translation adjustments, smart contract risk. If you're releasing smart contracts and those smart contracts get exploited, there may be a lawsuit coming your way from the people that had funds locked up in there. And we talked about this a couple days ago on maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago on when we talked about DUNAs, which is a new type of organization for DAOs. If you don't have a jurisdiction as a DAO, you can get sued from any jurisdiction. And the people who are suing you are likely going to choose the jurisdiction that is most favorable to them. And so having jurisdictional clarity is another challenge, and another thing that the CFO in modern day society needs to be aware of is where are you and that's a compliance issue as well. Where are you legally? Where are you from a jurisdictional standpoint? What is your location? So that's on the compliance without borders, and if you are a DAO or you are a company that's operating in many different jurisdictions, how do you manage and stay on top of those different regulations? I know that Lourdes has talked about this previously. Lourdes, how do you stay on top of, managing different jurisdictions and from a compliance perspective? It's chaos, right?
Yes. When I was working with startups as a consultant, I would hire country managers in locations where their products were being offered. So the country managers will report to me, let me know what's going on in their jurisdiction. That's how I kept up. And I kept an Excel spreadsheet of what was going on.
I love it. Yeah. You have to stay abreast of all that stuff because it's constantly changing and it impacts the business, right? And so, very important stuff. And then, we talked a little bit about this, but it's only, obviously when we talk about crypto CFOs, there are folks that are going to be working with companies that aren't really touching Web3, but accept digital assets, right? So that's going to lead to the challenges that we've highlighted so far with security and, making certain internal controls. But when you get into CFOs of crypto native projects that have launched their own token, you may be responsible for managing liquidity pools as well. And so many projects that launch a token, the first way that they do it is on a decentralized exchange because there's no KYC. There's no, you don't have to there's no investment contract. So you're not like, you may be under the scrutiny of the SEC, but you don't have any actual hoops to jump through. So it's very easy to do. And so a lot of projects will spin up an entity in the Cayman Islands, for example, and then launch a token. But now you have the responsibility of managing a liquidity pool, which never existed in traditional finance, where you have a decentralized group of folks that are adding liquidity to this pool. You as a company are likely initiating that liquidity add by funding it initially, but you have unrealized gains or maybe realized gains. We that's a little bit of a gray area in this field, but you accrue rewards in those liquidity pools based on the trading volume that goes through them. It could be 3%, 0.3%, or it could be 0.5%. I don't know the exact fees right now. It depends on also how popular the token pair is. And you can actually set different liquidity bands. It gets very complicated with the new Uniswap V4 and V3. But essentially, you're managing a decentralized market maker where you're earning fees as well. So you have to kind of quantify how much in fees you're earning over the course of different periods. Which I know when I was at TrustSwap, that was a nightmare because I had to monitor what percentage of the liquidity pools we held so that I could look at what volume was going through that on a day-to-day basis and then estimate how much in unrealized revenue we had, which is a moving target because people are entering and exiting the liquidity pool as well. So my ownership of that liquidity pool, the percentage that I own of that liquidity pool, which dictates how much I earn, is changing on a second-by-second basis. And so you've got X that's changing and Y that's changing, and now you're trying to estimate how much your unrealized gains are. And so another kind of mind-bending thing that most crypto CFOs won't have to deal with, because if you're just accepting tokens, you probably aren't dealing with liquidity on a DEX. But if you're a CFO of a project that's launching on a DEX, you're most likely going to have to deal with this, and you may have to deal with it on multiple different chains. So that's one last aspect that I wanted to highlight here is, managing liquidity on multiple different chains. Brandon just pulled up our wallet. MetaMask has a really great new feature where you can, they have a portfolio feature where you can track how much you have, and it summarizes how much you have on different EVM compatible chains. And so you can see what you have on Optimism, on Polygon, on ETH, all in one location. And so using tools like that where it aggregates the information into one spot is really, really key and really helpful. But the managing of liquidity is a really tough beast because you have a huge responsibility there. You are and many Web3 organizations, or if you want to be taken seriously, I think in today's day and age, you need to be locked, and you have liquidity in a decentralized exchange. You want to be locking those liquidity tokens up, especially if you're a new project launched, because you want to signal to your token holders that you're not going to rug pull them, right? And when we talk about with a rug pull is that there's a liquid market for these assets, and then all of a sudden the company pulls all the liquidity out, and maybe they shut down the project or whatever. But as those liquidity pools build, they can be worth, millions of dollars. And so what a lot of companies did in the 2017 ICO boom, or even in 2020, 2021, when we had DeFi summer, is they would launch a project, it would have all this hype, it would generate this huge market cap, and then they would pull all the liquidity and shut the doors, and they'd, run away with their pockets full, right? And so if you're a Web3 organization and you are launching, it's my high recommendation that the team, so the folks that are involved that are getting a token allocation of the original supply, that those are on a vesting schedule locked up by a smart contract. Team.finance has a really great tool for this. Just note, I used to be CFO of TrustSwap, which acquired Team Finance. So I don't have any current ties to the team, but I that's why I'm recommending it, is because I used to be involved. So Team.finance is a really good place to do token locks and liquidity locks. They have audited smart contracts that have been audited by Hacken and a number of other smart contract auditing firms to ensure that there's that the code within these smart contracts is clean, right? To a certain degree. And so new projects launching, I would recommend that they lock up their team tokens so that those team tokens vest over a period of time. This signals to your token holders that, hey, the team's not just going to get their 20% supply and then dump on you the next day. We're in this for at least 2 years, right? We're going to get a slow drip, or we're going to get a vesting cliff after 6 months or something like that, so that you can continuously signal to your investors, hey, we're not going to run away. This is a legit project, right? Same thing with liquidity pool tokens. You want to lock those up. If you're an established business and you're just providing another way for your token holders to purchase in a more easy way, maybe it's less important for you to lock up those liquidity pool tokens. But still, I think there's an importance here to say, hey, we're not going to just pull this liquidity off of this market. We're going to have this here for a long time. So I've talked a lot this call. I kind of want to just open it up to other folks to see if there's anyone else that has kind of any thoughts on what additional roles the CFO has or challenges that they come across. Just because I think that there's a lot of stuff here, and I want to shut my mouth now.
Yeah, I have a few points. Oh, somebody driving by. So one thing is, you talk about being involved in like liquidity pools and kind of like next level things, but even on the surface level, let's just say you're a new business, you just started accepting crypto. Me and you just looked at our portfolio through the MetaMask thing, and my first thing was like, oh, we lost $300 out of nowhere over the past few days. So it's like just that. Just getting used to that as a CFO, because it can work both ways, so we're not providing any liquidity. We hold a very small amount of our company's funds in crypto, but there is an upside to that and there is a downside to that. And I think going back to my marketing allowance scenario, if I'm the marketing team, maybe my $10,000 a quarter budget increases to 13,000 because we held, Matic or something else of that nature. So as a CFO, I would imagine that's a headache in itself, because it's like at any given point, it's like, how much money does the company have? You don't really know. It can drastically change. Whereas in TradFi, it's like, if you don't spend any money, most likely that money's just going to sit in your bank account and just be there. So it's things to think about, just with that, not even providing
I said I
liquidity.
wouldn't. I said I wouldn't talk anymore, but I have a really good example of that where when we started TrustSwap, we minted. So I came in right when we were launching our token on Index, and we minted, the full supply of the tokens for like 11 cents, I think it was, or maybe it was $11, because I think we were initially on ETH, so it was a bit more expensive. But that the initial value of those tokens was, I think, a half a cent was what we established the price at on the DEX. Because when you fund a liquidity pool, you have to basically set the price of the asset, because you have to set, let's say we put in $100,000 worth of TrustSwap tokens, we had to put in $100,000 of ETH, and we would do it in a ratio that would set the initial price. And the initial price that we set was a half a cent, I believe. But like, we had, hundreds of thousands of, or even, millions of these tokens. I think the initial supply was like 100 million tokens, or maybe it was, I think it was 100 million tokens. But so as a company, we had at our discretion, let's just call it 5 million tokens. So when that price ran up to $5, at one point, we had like our budget from month to month during the 2021 bull market would go up and down by millions of dollars. And so it's a challenge, because you want to move some of that money into stable coins, right? So that you can have the security of having operations. But on the flip side of that, because we minted these tokens for nothing, they sit on our balance sheet for nothing. So when you swap those to stable coins, you're creating a taxable event, right? Because you're converting something that you created out of thin air into money, like fiat money. And so it's, while it is a funding source, you have to also think of the tax implications of that when you've minted your own token. And
That's a lot. I mean, even for us, I mean, you look at, for us, like six months ago, maybe we sell an NFT 0.33 ETH. It's like 600 something dollars. And then like probably beginning of March, it's $1,200. So just by us holding that, now the good thing is we made more money. The bad thing is, what's the NFT sales tax based on that? What's the, how is everything? So the headaches that ensue on that point, and then as of today, it's probably worth $900. So it's like, by leaving that money in there, it fluctuates, like Taylor's saying. But I think for those, I was reading an article unrelated today about just like the AI is going to take everybody's jobs and all this other stuff. But I think for a CFO that can be very agile and truly understand the space that we're in, it's like, okay, 6 months ago we sold something for $600, we kept it in ETH, it's worth 1,200 now, we just doubled our money. Let's liquidate that and let's turn that back into fiat now. And so more of maybe an investment standpoint, I guess we would add on to the CFO's role. So very interesting times, because that could be an additional role for the CFO, which could include additional revenue, for the CFO to say, hey, I'm going to be investing, crypto, a certain percentage, maybe they're allotted a trading percentage or something of that nature. So definitely interesting.
So you got to be careful about that too, though, because we want to make sure that if you're the CFO, you are an investor and not a speculator, right? So it could be argued that nothing in crypto is investing, it's speculation. But if you haven't read The Intelligent Investor, this was a recommendation by Warren Buffett, and I know that Warren Buffett has said that Bitcoin is rat poison. So, but the principles that those books talk about is that you have to take a long view, right? And so, if you're buying or holding on to ETH so that you can double your money in the short term, that shouldn't be the thought process. It should be, hey, this company, we intend to run this company for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so we want to acquire as much ETH as possible, because we believe that in 10 years, ETH is going to be worth a lot more than it's worth right now. So for us, it's about that long game. But in the same time, to your point, you got to be worried about short-term volatility. So I think that it's all about managing risk at the end of the day, and it becomes more and more important in a realm where there's so many additional risks and so many additional opportunities, and so
And you got to think too, the cost of playing the game. You know, if you're accepting transactions in TradFi, you know, maybe you're paying your payment processor 2%, you know, and it's like a flat rate. Where here, it's like I would assume, generally speaking, larger organizations would be transacting in Bitcoin or Ethereum for the most part, and the transaction fees on some of those large transactions are very hefty. So it's like they would most I would assume would keep their crypto holdings and not, you know, turn them into fiat. So just to save on the transaction fees, you know, like I wouldn't want to charge a customer something, make X amount of money, and then have to pay all these transaction fees, sometimes depending on, you know, congestion on the network and things of that nature that be much higher than a 2%
yeah,
fee. So
and the nice thing about those large institutions is that, yes, transaction fees can be high on Bitcoin or Ethereum, like on the like the settlement layers,
mhm.
but that doesn't scale with the amount of assets that you're
True,
transacting. So,
true,
like
true,
if
true.
you're um, Fidelity and you're trying to
Yeah,
move
I guess
Bitcoin
it wouldn't.
across
Yeah,
to different jurisdictions and you send $1 billion, it's going to be the same network
same
fee of
amount. True,
maybe
true,
like
true.
a couple of dollars. But that's why we have layer twos and bridging and all that stuff, and that's where the added complexities comes from. So,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's a lot more to think about, and I think that even though AI can help us with some of our job, the emerging industries like crypto are going to create new jobs that never existed before, because the CFO can't just be one person. You almost need multiple CFOs
Yeah.
or multiple people in that organization. You can't just have one CFO in these bigger crypto firms, because you need the support system of other folks to be able to help you manage these different types of risks. And I think it's going to evolve into more C-level roles that help with managing those things, like compliance officers. Not that that didn't exist before, but it's going to become more apparent and more necessary. Um,
Another thing
so
that Zach added to the list as well would be employee compensation now with fiat, stablecoins, and token management, and trying to manage all of that as a CFO, you know, as opposed to just having an automatic, you know, a salary that goes out to all employees. Now you're paying some employees in fiat, some employees in stablecoins, some employees in tokens, tax implications, accounting implications, all of that needs to come into play. So I agree with you. I think there'll be multiple either branches of the CFO seat or additional seats that will be added to the teams.
absolutely.
I have a quick question. I don't have an accounting background. Where on your balance sheet, your income statement, does crypto go?
It's
Is
an
it an asset?
intangible. It's an intangible asset, and I mean,
Okay.
but that can depend on it depends on the nature of the underlying asset, right? And so if you have, for example, if you had tokenized real estate, that would go on your balance sheet wherever the real estate would go, right? Big long-term assets, right? So generally speaking, like ETH or Bitcoin, those are indefinite lived intangible assets with fair value reporting now under FASB. So you mark to fair value at the end of each year. But if you haven't yet, you should watch Stacey Ferris's digital asset taxonomy from CTAC, because she really highlights how important it is to consider what the underlying function of the digital asset is in order to properly categorize that on the balance sheet or other financial statements, because a single use NFT may not even go on your balance sheet, because those are like if you're playing like let's for example, if there was an on-chain version of Pokemon, for example, and you had some like energy card that gets you like energy in that game, that's a single use NFT that like would be destroyed after you use it, and it doesn't really have any value in a business sense, so it may not even go on your balance sheet. Whereas something um, like a stable coin, for example, could be held in cash and cash equivalents, right? Because if it's USDC, you know, you could bucket that there because it's traditionally held its peg very closely, and so you could have USDC as a digital asset under your cash and cash equivalents because you can very easily convert your USDC to fiat dollars on Coinbase and then send that over to your bank account. So it really, we take a look through approach in a lot of this, and it's really just looking at what are the characteristics of the asset that we're looking at. But by default, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum are indefinite lived intangible assets. So asset section of the balance sheet.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah. How's the accounting program going, by the way?
I can't stop crying, but it's going well.
Lourdes recently.
I'm like WTF,
grad
and I'm not thinking
program.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday either. But I'm learning about balance sheets, income statements, and cash statement flows that you said.
Yeah.
But thank you for asking. I'm still staying strong.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's especially those. The
I blame you
intermediate
guys,
accounting-
by the way, that I'm in this program.
Those accounting is no joke, especially the fundamental and intermediate courses. I remember, I think it was, yeah, I think intermediate accounting was like my biggest, I think the worst class I ever took. Not from a grade perspective, but just like you're saying, like sobbing while you're studying, just like the CPA exam. But anyway,
Thanks for that.
more to look forward to, right? Yeah. Anyways, any other final thoughts on this? We're approaching the hour mark, so I just wanted to give people any other final thoughts on this one.
I have one final thought. As a new CFO, where do you start when you walk in? Where do you start?
What do you mean?
What happens if your corporation that hired you doesn't have anything about crypto, about securing it or anything like that? I mean,
So we just launched our certification program, and that would be a great place to start now. I think it's education, though. All jokes aside, it's
no,
learning,
you're right.
learning the space, and being involved in, you know, obviously I'm biased, but being involved in communities and conversations like this, where we can just sit for an hour and we just came up with 5 different roles that can be added to a corporation. So it's like thinking about the future, the long-term perspective on it. I don't think there's any map that's drawn yet to say, hey, you should go here, you should go here. That's part of our goal, is to kind of, you know, provide this for the industry long term. But right now, I don't know, maybe Taylor, you know, has a different idea, but I think there's no clear starting point. It's just, you have to jump in, you have to get your hands dirty, get a wallet, set it up, you know, and just kind of start there. I would assume.
Like all of us.
Yep.
Like all of us.
For me, the advice I would give would be, you know, if you're coming into a company that's like, if you're at the ground level when it's starting up, that's the best position to be in, because you can implement the best practices and the, you know, like really good wallet hygiene, for example, and just set things up from the outset so that there's not a mess to unwind later. Almost every project that I've been involved in, I've come in after the fact. And so you're generally working with folks, at least this was, you know, back 2020, 2021, when you had people, you can launch a token in 2 seconds and then it could, you know, shoot up in value to hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, over the course of a 2-month period. And so now you have, you know, a massive business that needs a lot of things to be unwound. So I would say if you're joining at the start, put in place good policies, procedures, document them all. Really solid wallet hygiene and internal controls, like I said, and make sure that you're involved in the conversations as the project gets steered in different directions. So what I mean by that is, like, if the project's deciding that they want to introduce liquidity on a new chain like Avalanche or Optimism or something like that, make sure that you're involved in that conversation, and make sure that you understand and are in charge of creating those wallets to facilitate that, so that you can document how that process underwent. If you're reactive in this role and you're reacting to what the rest of the team is doing, it becomes a lot more hard, because everything moves fast. People are less likely to remember what happened with a certain transaction. But if you're joining if you are having to unwind, you know, and you're coming in after things have been set up and after things have been kind of rolling, the first thing I would do is quantify the chaos, right? You want to jump in and see what the chaos is like and quantify it, right? Because that's where you have to start initially, is to figure out what has been, for lack of a better term, screwed up. I'll use that term. What has been messy? What's messy? What's wrong with the policies and procedures that have been in place? Are there any? Most likely they're not. Usually in a lot of these organizations, and so yeah, quantifying the chaos and seek out help from folks that maybe you're not experienced with every single jurisdiction that company is operating in. So as you're alluding to, find folks that understand the regulatory environment, find folks that understand the tax and accounting environment for that place, and connect with them so that you can bridge those gaps and create a really solid team to be able to perform this role in an effective and efficient way.
Thank you, Taylor. I mean, this is a great water cooler. In a few months, I have 2 speaking engagements on building your crypto compliance program. And I'm going to reinforce the CFO position that CFO should collaborate with CCOs and CTOs, like you said, and so forth. So thank you for today's discussion. Something I need to add to my presentation. And of course, I'm going to mention you guys because I love you guys.
Nice. Thank you. Appreciate that. Cool. Well,
I think that was
any
good.
other final thoughts?